2, 1.
Ooh, happy Friday. We are back with honestly, I gotta say, selfishly, I'm excited for this episode. Or maybe I always say
Yay.
I'm excited, but we have Dr. Brittany Woolford, who is not only an amazing businesswoman, but one of my dear friends. I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I always love chatting with the both of you, so I'm excited for us to have an episode together.
I love it. I was even thinking too, it's Women's Month in March. So Andy, we should really
Oh,
just have only female guests all month long.
I love that.
Yeah. I
yeah,
feel like we know
that's
a lot
perfect.
of badass female business owners in our lives.
Yeah.
We've got like a
Yeah,
Siamese twin thing going on. Super black. I'm
I know, Andy. I
standing,
try to
so I'm like
match you.
scooting back to try to be like
Uh,
exactly the same size as you.
I know Andy always wears a black t-shirt, so it's helpful. Like if
yeah.
I'm ever like, oh, I want to match him, I just wear a black t-shirt too. And
There you
you
go.
know, for those who are watching and don't know, I'm 8 months pregnant, and very few things in my closet fit me. So it was black t-shirt day.
Love it.
Love this. I mean, when you're doing like recordings and stuff, like that's what you're supposed to do, right? Like plain solid colors are like the best. So
I mean, I will say though, I'm glad
good
you brought the
staple.
pop of color this morning. We needed that for Friday.
Okay, thanks, thanks. It's my token. I always just put a scarf over a sweater and you're good to
It's
go.
nice.
Hey, you got to have your signature look. It works. So
I
I
will
want to
say
make
I'm not
sure.
looking forward.
Okay.
Oh, I'm not looking forward to it being spring and it no longer being socially acceptable to just wear sweaters and leggings all the time.
I
So I'm
know.
not looking forward to that. Andy,
Maybe need to
is that
go.
just like such a struggle for you?
Preach. It's my game.
Andy has his one like Big Lebowski sweater that we always joke about that he bought
Yeah.
for an ugly sweater party, but it's like actually a really nice sweater.
Ah,
It really pisses me off
nice.
all the expensive clothes that I wear to work and people don't give a crap. And then I wear my Big Lebowski sweater and everybody gives me compliments. So it's definitely the most complimented piece of clothing I own and got it by accident, but that's how it happens.
You know, that came out in 93. You could dress up as Big Lebowski next weekend.
Yeah.
There you go.
I'm having a little 1993 themed birthday party, so I'm totally revealing my age to the world, which is totally fine. I'm turning 30, and we're all
Woo.
dressing up like it's 1993. Anyway, we can talk about business stuff, and I want to make sure I introduce Brittany in case you guys don't know her. She's the owner of Lone Wolf. She works with individuals, couples, and groups, helping them feel more connected to themselves and others. Specializes in dating, online dating, divorce, breakups, couples, premarital therapy, trauma, sexual functioning, and anxiety and depression that often results from these difficulties. So, really, you're helping people with some of the biggest problems in their lives.
You probably should have given the whole suffix of Lone Wolf Psychological Services. Brittany's a
Oh,
therapist, y'all.
fair.
Yeah.
So I like Andy's intro.
There you go. Mic drop.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Brittany, give us a little background. Like, what brought you into this world for people who haven't heard your story yet?
Yeah. So I always say my like coming to therapy moment. I'm sure that both of you have heard this way too many times at this point. But was in seventh grade. I had a friend who was experiencing some unrequited love, as we all do in junior high or middle school.
I had that
And
yesterday.
like had yeah, or every day. I don't know. Most people in life are experiencing this. But yeah, so had helped her through that. And afterwards, she's like, you should do this as a job. And I was like, cool. And so then that's kind of what I've done ever since seventh grade. So I'm a weirdo, one of those weird people that like decided what to do from like very early on. And so undergrad, grad school, all of that focused on relationships and trying to figure that out. I identify, I know we're going to talk a little bit more about like attachment, and I very much identify as this as an avoidant attachment soul. And so connecting with people and developing that intimacy, it was like really challenging or just felt like kind of like a mystery of how do I deepen relationships. And so that like kind of inspires me like diving in and really understanding what healthy relationships are. And then came to Denver now 4 years ago, and Lone Wolf has been up and running now for 3 years. Um, And yeah, diving into all things relationships. We say, relationships bring us the most pain and also the most joy. And so when it comes to mental health, that's, it's kind of what life's all about, is relationships and connection. So we focus on the spectrum of different relationship things that might come up.
Right. And obviously we, love what you're up to because, I send all of my matchmaking clients that I can to you, romantic matchmaking clients. And, I feel like too, for Andy and I were just recording an interesting podcast episode yesterday of like dating as a business owner, which was kind of obviously interesting because there are different challenges, also lots of overlap. But I would think that as a business owner too, it's like if you don't have your personal relationships kind of in check and feeling good, that's going to impact your business relationships too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like, and that's what kind of like attachment theory stems out of. It's not just that like you're this way with romantic partners. It's like you're this way with everyone. And so that same like attachment stuff and coping that you use in romantic relationships are coming out in your business relationships as well, and in your dating and like connecting and networking and all of that. It all shows up there too.
Can you also give us examples of the different attachment styles, just in case people aren't familiar?
Yeah.
I feel like there's a lot of talk about this now, but people listening may not know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love to dive in. So attachment theory is kind of just your relationship personality type. So if you ever take like a personality quiz, it's kind of like that, but describing more relationship patterns. And so there are 4 types. The first one is secure. This is kind of, what we're all aiming for. And these are people that feel really comfortable being by themselves and really comfortable having really close, intimate relationships. So kind of like that dual piece. And so just kind of feeling at peace in their relationships. These are people in your life that, maybe have good relationships with their family, have a good, secure romantic relationship, have a good group of friends. Like you notice they just kind of like are really doing well in relationships. Also, again, how that works, have like better mental health outcomes as well. So probably lower depression, lower anxiety. These are people in our life who are like, oh, they're crushing it. And like, we want their like secret sauce. And then we have on the 2 different spectrums, we have anxious and avoidant. So with the anxious attachment style, these are folks that are just a little bit more preoccupied with their relationships, a little bit more worried about rejection. They're just have a little more like emotional excitement. And so when they're upset, when they're happy, there's just a little bit more intense emotionality there. So these are people that are probably serial monogamous, or like have on and off again relationships. They also typically have really good like social relationships because they really value relationships, and just a really like connection with people is really important. So this is your friend that like always remembers your birthday and like is just always excited to be around you and very generous. So they might have some of that anxious attachment pieces as well. And then avoidant attachment on the opposite spectrum. These are folks that have, learned that maybe others aren't as reliable. So they just depend on themselves. They kind of think others are needy and get really protective if they feel like people are trying to like take advantage or use them in a certain way and kind of shut down and back off. They're also very like emotionally muted. So we could be in a like a big, disagreement or fight, and they're just kind of talking in a regular tone and like, I'm fine. Those are kind of more of our avoidant folks. And these people typically do really well in business and are really high achievers because at the end of the day, they're going to get it done. They're going to take on all the extra projects. They're going to do a bunch of work and really invest in themselves. And so a lot of times we see these folks more in like the business realm, and also like really idolized in our like American culture of like pull yourself up by your bootstraps, don't need anyone ever, the lone wolf. And so those are kind of like 2 spectrums. And so then we have folks who have more of a fearful attachment. And this is a lot of times if you've had trauma in your past or really kind of chaotic upbringing, we have both anxious and avoidant tendencies. So they may want a lot of closeness and then push away. So you've ever experienced this like push pull from someone of like they really want to be close, but then they push away. They probably have some of that like battle of anxious and avoidant coping going on.
I feel like that fearful attachment style has got to be just very difficult to navigate, it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, research says that like this is like kind of the like people that struggle the most with relationships. Um, Anecdotally, I'll say like working in a therapy setting and really talking to people about attachment, I think that like we all have these different strategies. We all have different ways to kind of close up and protect ourselves, or ways where like we're nervous about rejection and we may act out in a certain way. Um, so I think there's a lot more people that may have some of these like tendencies and reactions than we realize, and might not look as like extreme as the research may talk about some of these folks.
Fair. And I know too, I tend towards avoidant. It was interesting that you said that tends to be like business owner types, which kind of does make sense. You're like, yeah, I got this on my own. I can run a business.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'd be curious, like, hey, if you're watching and you want to share your attachment style, we'd love to know if you're a business owner. I feel like this is your
Yeah.
next research piece or something.
I mean, I'm done with research. I wrote a
Yeah, you're
master's
like, Abby,
thesis,
I
a
have
doctoral
enough to do.
dissertation. I am done with research. But also, right, if you head to my Instagram, if you just hit the link tree, there's a attachment quiz if you're curious and you want to figure that out. If you're a business owner, you're like, I wonder if this fits for me. Go ahead and do that.
And we have the link to all of Brittany's socials below this video. So you can just go and click it. Andy, I don't want to ignore you over there. Like, what's going on? I know you have a million good questions brewing.
No, I was trying to remember if I knew what my style was, but I think it's changed in the past. I
Ooh.
don't
Well, you'll
know
have to
that
take the
we've
quiz and update us if you
painted
want.
that one as the best one this time around, so maybe I won't reveal.
Well, now I think that's a great point, Andy, that like these things are changeable. Right. It used to be that the research would say like, birth to age 3 is when you develop this, and then you're screwed for the rest of your life.
Lovely.
Whereas I think very much these like are movable pieces, where like I say that like I act mostly secure in relationships, but when I'm super stressed or worked up, or like when certain things hit certain buttons for me, my attachment system's activated and I do use more like avoidance strategies. And so I think it's very much more of that, of like maybe like a baseline coping and strategies when we're feeling really stressed may come out in more of those like different attachment categories. But yeah, definitely can like change and shift and feel more secure. Also depending on the people you're in a relationship with. So if you're in a relationship with someone who's super anxious, who's like clingy and like wants to text you every 5 minutes, and if you don't text them back within 5 minutes, then it's a like complete meltdown, right? Like you may find yourself reacting a little more avoidant to that as well. So it's a lot more mobile and complicated than just like 4 categories that you could fit in.
What about the I think I would be in the lesser or tighter anxious avoidant, but I guess here we go, internet. My thing is like if I'm working on a relationship or in one that it's really, really, and this is romantically, business, etc. But the more fired up, anxious side if it's happening, but then if it doesn't work out, you're dead to me. It's like it never existed. Like I can move on 2 minutes later. So I think maybe that's an avoidant discharge. I don't know.
Right, like look, avoided coping strategy. Right, if we like change it to that instead of like here's this like deficient thing you have, it's like, oh, you've learned to cope in this way because I imagine like past hurtful experiences that this like helps you self-soothe in that moment. And like I said, like anecdotally, I feel like more in the world there's people with kind of both strategies than not. So a lot
I
of times
think
people
I have enabled myself to eliminate the ability to have disappointment. So if it's working, I'm really hopeful. If it's not, I'm done.
Yeah.
I feel like this is going to turn into a therapy session for Andy and I'm kind of excited.
always here for that.
But on the business of it all, since we're talking about your business and not my love life,
we'll get into that when we end the live stream. Don't worry.
How are things going in the landscape of therapy post-pandemic? obviously all of these online resources came out, which
Mhm.
have been largely positive. It's made psychological services available to more people, obviously technology wise and finance wise. It's also enabled traditional therapists to see people virtually more commonly versus always
Mhm.
in person. But how have things been going maybe in the industry as a service provider in mental health in the past few years? Because pretty much everybody's gone through some stuff.
Yeah, I think that's like a great question and something that like therapists are talking about constantly. I think there's like a lot of good and a lot of like ooh, stuff happening. Where if you ask any therapist, we're all super judgy about the like talk space and better help and things like that, where it's taking these really talented therapists and really making it so they have to be really pigeonholed in how they approach therapy, and then they're paid really poorly for someone who has like an advanced degree. And then like I was watching the like Uber, it wasn't the actual documentary, but it was like, you know, playing around with like the Uber startup. And kind of what tech companies do is that like they lure you in with these really great benefits, with like this really great pay. And then, you know, these therapists are like, oh, this is wonderful. I can do this from home. I can be virtual. I can see as many clients as I want. They give me tons. Um, so they maybe like stop working at another job or stop their private practice and they're all in, and then it kind of like they shift and they take away the benefits or they decrease the pay or they do some of these things that, you know, and then your therapist who's now seeing way too many clients and is, you know, angry with the company is now trying to give you good quality care, and we're humans too, so that's going to come out in the care. um, while I think that this has made it really accessible for people and people are more like willing to dive into therapy of, oh, I can just go on an app and like message someone, where I think that's really enticing. I think that I see a lot of people calling in. They're like, yeah, I tried the BetterHelp and you know, it was okay, but it wasn't really that helpful. I think a lot of people, those first experiences with therapy are now with these more like apps, and they're like, oh, this is therapy, and it may turn them off to it. So that's my worrying caution. And then I'll point like to the research shows that I think it's like, and don't quote me on this because I do not remember the exact percentage, but it's like 30 or 45% of the factors that actually influence change in therapy is your relationship with the therapist. So we have all this like
Oh,
chat
interesting.
GT and these like BetterHelp where you're just like texting with your phone, where you're not actually developing a relationship with your therapist. So, you know, again, 30 to like 45%. It's like the biggest chunk. I don't remember exact percentage. Is that relationship with a therapist, and you're not getting that. So that amount of change, you know, it's not likely to happen in those spaces. So while yes, I want access for everyone, and I think these are really great for like mental hygiene skills. So things that are really concrete behavioral things that you can add into your day. And I love that the internet, TikTok, that BetterHelp, all these things are really providing a lot of like skills for folks. But I think that like deeper relational work still has to be done with a person, either like virtually or in office. So I'll pause there. I have more thoughts about technology, but I wanted to give you all a
I would
chance to
assume
react.
too that probably is especially heightened if it is a couple seeking therapy, because if you're with them in person, you can sense their body language, you can get the full frame picture versus sitting side by side in front of a Zoom in your own home with kids running by or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if a couple told me they'd used like one of the apps or something like that for couples therapy, like it makes me a little like sick to my stomach, because it's just there's so much going on and so much in the moment. And we call something called like catching the bullet, is like our job of like when a partner says something like sharp or harsh, like our job as a couples therapist is to catch the bullet before it hits the other person, because if they say something like that, that shuts down all vulnerability, and then, you know, therapy from then on is not very good because their walls are up. So yeah, I'm imagining in that space that if it is more like AI or computer generated things, like that's going to really not be helpful for that.
So do you take on people that you have for the life of your time together worked with only virtually? I mean, it's important to say that it's not just synonymous of these virtual services and the virtual experience. Regular therapists also see their people remotely.
Yes. Yeah. So that's like the other half. There's the tech companies coming in and trying to streamline and break down what therapy is in these ways that really, again, good for mental health hygiene, but not really great for that like more like sustainable deep change. And on the other side, like that virtual piece that we now have more access to, I think is like so wonderful. And I do have clients that I've like only ever seen virtually, and we do have a great relationship, and we do have great rapport. I'll say also for couples, it's really helpful not having to hire a babysitter, not having two different people having to commute through rush hour. And then I'll say as a therapist, right? Like if you've ever been in a room with like one of your friends who are like a couple who are in a fight, and you just feel that like that intensity.
Not a good feeling.
Yeah, right. Like for me as a couples therapist, that like having that screen or having that like kind of virtual distance allows for me to regulate my nervous system better so that I can be more present and, I can catch the bullets more than like feeling really activated myself. So I think for couples therapy, virtual can be a really great option. Again, I'm all for in person, especially if you feel like that is like a really great fit for you and that works and location's great. You both can make it there. I think, in person's really wonderful. The other really great thing that came out of COVID is a lot of more universal licensing. So there is PsyPact and Compact. So PsyPact is for psychologists and Compact is for people with licensed counselors, I think licensed social worker. So more like the master level degree in licensing. So multiple states. So right now, PsyPact, I think it's 34 states. So, right, like we have an expertise in this area of working with couples and a relationship and attachment, and especially like non-monogamous couples or queer couples, where someone maybe in Alabama might not be able to find a therapist who maybe fits some of those things that they're looking for. So now they have access to us via virtual services. I also have several travel nurses. So this has been really wonderful for them. If they are, hopping around different PsyPact states, like they can keep the relationship with me and they don't have to find a new therapist for the 3 months that they're in a new space. So I think it's really opened up what that can look like for therapy instead of being like, you have to be in my office in the state of Colorado and that's the only way I can see you.
Right. And I could
Long-winded
imagine
answer.
like, hey, this is good. I can imagine it's also made you busier in a way too. Like, how do you balance, the work you do is not just emotional for the clients, but I'm sure obviously it takes a lot of your emotional energy. So how do you kind of balance that yourself?
Man. Yeah. And that's, definitely something just being in private practice by myself that I noticed when I was just seeing clients all day long by myself, not really interacting with many other therapists or anything like that, or having any different roles. I was realizing that was like impacting me more. And so, as a way to kind of combat that and wear different hats and getting to stretch these different muscles that, I really love, I then started growing my practice. So, right now, I actually have another wonderful therapist who is amazing. And I know, Abby, you've met her. I don't know, Andy, if you've met Mallory. But we do like a shared training space. So we both have postdocs and students, and we kind of do some trainings together. So my week is now filled with some like supervisory, administrative tasks, supervision, doing like different trainings with our therapists and like administrative business pieces, which can be really exciting and fun. And I'm also starting to teach a course at a couples therapy course this spring. And so I'm getting to wear and put on these different hats in a way that I'm still utilizing all of these skills that I've developed, but in a way that really protects some of that emotional energy. Yeah.
So exciting. And what have been, I guess maybe some of the challenges in growing your business and, bringing on new people, getting a new space. Sorry if I'm spilling the
Yeah.
beans.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So I was really lucky that I got an office during the pandemic. And as most people know, right, that the commercial real estate was like really tanking during the pandemic because everyone is not being in the office. So I had this
Mhm.
really wonderful office space near Wash Park that has these lovely mountain views, and I like love this space so much. It's dear to my heart. And I was able to get that during this time because COVID, and they were pretty much wanting any people that were willing to take office space at that time. But now Mallory and I have grown to the point where next year we will have 2 licensed psychologists, 3 postdocs, and 4 students, and then both Mallory and I. So we obviously need more space. And so we will be opening a new office in the like low-high area. So we'll be able to do more like South Metro and North Metro, kind of hitting both ends. And that will be a really wonderful, cool space. It's right off of 25, super easy to get to. So we're super excited about that. That will be opening up in May. So yeah, I think it's just
Awesome.
the growing point where I went to school for therapy and not for business. But thankfully I come from like an entrepreneurial family, and I've gotten a lot of support from my parents of like navigating and figuring out like the different business pieces. Um, yeah, so I think there's the piece where I'm having to really juggle and manage and kind of shift how much time I'm spending client facing to really make sure that I can show up for my therapists at my practice and really support them as much as I can. So I think that's a juggle. I think just the expansion piece of figuring out like where I need help and support, like more administrative support in these different areas, and figuring all that out. I know I've like poked Abby several times. It's like, once you have the baby, you want to become my like community ambassador marketer. Please
I don't know.
do.
It's a tempting job. I don't know how Andy might feel about that, but I feel like I could do 3 jobs. Why not?
Oh gosh, with the newborn, I'm sure. Oh
Right?
gosh.
Right.
So what happens when you Abby kind of touched on it a minute ago in terms of your own mental health for therapists. So now that you are responsible for, you said licensed therapists, postdocs, trainees, students, uh,
Mhm.
I have heard a lot of things on podcasts and in a couple people that I know about therapists that pre-pandemic were like still down to see 35, 40 people a week. Let's just stack an 8-hour day.
Mhm.
And now I only want to see 20, or I only want to have 50 total people. It seems like a lot of therapists needed to reduce their workload, and maybe having some of them be remote or virtual makes that a little easier than in
Mhm.
person. But now that you're responsible for other people's success, they obviously want to make money. This is their job.
Mhm.
But how do you manage the workload of the different practitioners that are in your practice,
Mhm.
and maybe if it varies between person to person?
Yeah, yeah. So I think that goes to both Mallory and I's shared values around this training consortium and just having people, is that we don't want that, or we don't, because you're not going to be a good therapist, and we want to support clients. Whereas, like, we are mostly private pay, and our postdocs and our licensed therapists are charging quite a bit, but that's so they can have a smaller caseload and really dedicate time to their clients, to their own training, to their own supervision experiences, and all these different pieces. That's really important to Mallory and I. So we say our expectation is 20 to 25. We don't want you seeing more than that. And have like a big expectation around that. I also am very much open of like, if they're saying, hey, like I'm really feeling tapped out at 20, and I can't do any more than that, or like they're worried or concerned about making enough money if they're only seeing 20 folks, then I tap into my realm that's closer to you guys, where it's like, okay, like what passive income, what other avenues can I help support them where maybe they're not having to just wear that therapist hat for more than 20 sessions a week. So very much Mallory and I are protective over our people and not wanting them to burn out, because I've had a lot of colleagues and friends that they're in centers where they're seeing 10 people a day, and that's not ethical. You're not a good therapist if you're sitting with people's like deep emotions for 10 hours a day. You're not a good therapist at that point. You are just like client mill. That's very much not what we want to be. Now, also to combat that, right, we want to really advocate for our therapists. We want them to be paid well and paid, for the degree they have, right? These therapists have their doctors. They've been in school for 5 or 6 years, graduate school, not even undergrad. So we want them to be paid adequately for their degree and for their time. And we also want to balance the idea of like being accessible to people, which is why we also brought on students, where students have a very reduced rate. And then it's kind of pay what you can after that, right? So we have their set rate. And then if a client's like, yeah, I really can't do that. Or if my student comes to me and they're like, hey, I think they should be seen every week, but they can't afford that. Like, cool, whatever they can pay if they need to come every week. So very much trying to like meet the need and be accessible to people, while also our licensed folks and our people who've been in school and have been poor grad students for most of their adult life, right? Making sure that they're getting paid well. So those are kind of our like tier of values of not being a therapy mill, and then also making sure people are adequately compensated for their work.
Can you also talk to the expanding stuff beyond the clinical hour? You were mentioning a lot of therapists are now doing group therapy or workshops or speaking opportunities or podcasts or online courses or informal dating coaching. There's so many things that people are doing now, but I wonder with the social media of it all, if you make very good social media content and it's informative and approachable. And I wonder if therapists view their persona as bringing it down to a human level and making it fun, but still having that kind of authoritative academic, I am a doctor kind of thing. How has that been going with therapists trying to do these ancillary services and still keeping it like, I'm your therapist, you come to my office?
Yeah. I think that's like, it's an interesting line. And I think there's like generational pieces. I think there's a lot of therapists I talk to that are like, I don't want to dance around for TikTok. Like, I don't really care about that. Like, I just want to see clients. Cool. I want to support that journey for you. If this is not an avenue you really want to pursue, great. And then there are people that like stay way too academic and remove themselves. And I don't think that like, people cling to that piece. But then there's this view of like therapists, like you should be seen as professional, you shouldn't disclose any information. So that line is hard because a lot of these social media platforms, you do well when you're talking about your own life story. So I think it's really playing with that line. There's been some therapists I'm like, that's a questionable choice. I don't know if I would reveal that about myself. But also, like, if you're not really wanting to be as client facing and you're doing more of this passive income type work, maybe that's okay, or maybe that works out for you. If like you're just really trying to tell your story and your healing journey, great, love that. And so I think it's a balancing act. Yeah, and I definitely have had a bunch of my own insecurities about making like reels or TikTok videos and things like that, and if other therapists and other professionals will judge me. And so I think it's, again, finding what that line looks like for you, and just who you are, because that's who I am as a therapist, right? Where I'm like really relational. I really want to connect with you. I use a lot of like self-disclosure in therapy, not like, here's my life story, but like, here's how I'm reacting to you in the moment. Here's how I feel about you or our relationship. And so I'm like just very personable in my therapy sessions. And I think there's people that aren't, and that's okay too, right? Like it's just different styles. And so that's probably going to show up in how they show up on social media as well.
Love it. And, we used to make a lot of TikTok videos together. We got to revive that.
Yeah, it was fun.
I don't know.
We do. Yeah. I will say my like social media heart has been like fading lately just with all the extra business responsibilities, but hopefully I can get back to a point. where that can be a little bit more a priority, because it was fun and it did feel like, especially when I was like really putting in the work and the effort, getting a lot of feedback from folks of how some of the things were helpful. And I think that's another way of like that like value of access of like, here's some things that people can readily access for free.
I love it. And you do have a course people can access too.
Yeah,
On your
that's
website,
true.
correct?
I
Tell us a
forget
little bit
about
about
that.
that.
Yeah, so I have just like attachment 101 course. So if you were listening to me talk about some of like the attachment stuff, you're like, I would love to know more. Great, go ahead. You can go on there. It just dives into the different attachment styles a little bit more. And then it talks you through each attachment style, how they go from like dating, relationship, breakup, divorce, and kind of what those different behaviors might look like. And then give you some worksheets of how to quiet some of that like attachment reaction or noise when you're having a really intense response. A lot of times people who feel more anxious attachment, they call it like this like anxious attachment spiral, where you're just like convinced yourself that someone hates you, that they're going to break up with you, and these anxious thoughts are just like overwhelming and physically overwhelming, even though your rational brain's like, I know this is anxiety right now. And so like some worksheets to help like manage that. And then avoidant folks, when our avoidant attachment is triggered, what we like to do is be like hypercritical of everyone and our like partners. And so if you find yourself like finding all of these flaws in the people you're in a relationship with, and you're like, you notice you get to this point where it's just like them breathing is like making you upset. Some worksheets on how to like manage and combat that.
I'm only laughing because I've totally been there, but
Yep. I had to check that for myself too, and I'm like, are these criticisms based in reality right now?
Fair. Exactly. So go check out the course. I would highly recommend it.
Yeah.
And then Brittany, where can everyone connect with you, get in touch with you, follow your TikToks and Reels when you get back into that?
Yeah. So great way. I am more of like an Instagram person. That's just where like I felt most comfortable technologically. So Lone Wolf Psych, I think, like you said, all of that's there.
Yep.
Is a great way. You can see some of just the things that I've created. And then in like, you go in the bio in the link tree, you can get to my website, you can get to blog, you can get to the course. All of those things are really easily accessible. And then literally everywhere on my Instagram, like on every page 5 times on my website, there's like a book now button. And that allows you to instantly schedule a phone consultation, which is free. And it's just kind of like a 15-minute, like, here's what's going on. Do you feel like you have a therapist that can help? So if you're like questionable about therapy and you're like, maybe want to try it out, go ahead and schedule one of those. Super easy. Abby turned me on to Calendly, and so it makes just life easier for everyone.
The best.
It
I
is
feel
the
like I should
best.
be like a Calendly affiliate with the amount of people
You
I've sent
should.
over there.
Ambassador. Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
But yeah, so that's just like an easy way to like get that first phone call out of the way. I know sometimes that's the hardest or most difficult hurdle. And if we aren't a good fit, we'll make sure we give you some resources to find a better fit.
Amazing. Well, thank you for sharing your wisdom, chatting with us. Selfishly, I always love to hang with you. So
Yeah.
spending my Friday morning, starting my day this way is perfect. Andy, any other parting words? I feel like I forgot to plug our podcast.
No, this episode will be available on all major podcast platforms on Tuesday. They always go live video on Friday and then podcast the following Tuesday. But other than that, you can find us at founderist.club. And if you know somebody who should be on the live stream, send us a message on the website. We love meeting new entrepreneurs and continuing. This is episode 31, and I gather we'll probably go forever.
We're never stopping. Okay, you got to hold us to that now.
Yeah.
Thank you again, Brittany. Have a great day.
Yeah.
See you.
Thanks for having me on.